Welcome to Cloud Dialogues, where we talk about cloud for executives and all topics related to that. And it's episode 9. Well, it feels like yesterday we started, and we're already up to 9. So today we're going to talk about the serverless operating model, and we have a special guest who is Joe Emison from Branch. Yay, welcome, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
for
me.
being with us, Joe. We're very excited. This is Matt's favorite topic.
That's
So
right.
we are very grateful.
I'm always spouting serverless with my clients, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. I guess a lot of it's about education, right? So it's about education and knowing other people's
Knowing what's
experiences
possible.
and knowing the art of the
Yep.
possible. So that's why we want to do a couple of serverless topics on the show to try and get that little bit more widespread. I know on Twitter, there's a lot of conversations a lot of the time, or X, I don't like to call it X, Twitter, on how serverless is expensive and all that fun stuff by certain people. It's nice to get someone who's done it, who runs it, who knows it, and can talk about how it really works from an operational perspective and how it benefits the organization. So, Joe, my first question is, how did you get involved in serverless? Because you started pretty early on. I guess it wasn't super early on, but it was relatively where we are today.
Yeah, I presented at the first serverless conf in Brooklyn in 2015.
Oh,
So
wow. That
that
was
was
early.
that was
Vintage.
that was
Vintage
the beginning, as
serverless.
far as I know. First conference talking about it. I actually, I see my career as a lot of how to build software more effectively by leveraging new advances in technology. So I always lament that there's no continuing education in tech, especially not in software dev. Like there's continuing education in real estate, but like technology changes so much more frequently than real
Exactly
estate
right.
does. It's just such a weird decisions in these industries. So my question to serverless was just in this attempt to build and deploy software more effective. I saw it and see it as a tool that makes better, cheaper, faster, better to build and run software.
And that's yeah, exactly why a lot of people do it, right? Because all that management underneath is taken care of. Like I've been in the enterprise for so many years, and buying racking servers and installing software, you're like 6 to 12 months. 10 years ago, you were 6 to 12 months before you actually even got any business value there, right?
And there's this, right. I mean, the more you work in larger organizations and you see all the things that prevent you from going quickly. I mean, there are some good things that prevent you from going quickly, but there are just bad things that prevent you from going quickly. And it seems pretty clear that handing off more and more of your undifferentiated work to a provider that's really good at it would be a good thing to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, exactly. Um,
You know?
so Branch, just tell us just a brief high level overview. Uh,
Sure. Branch is a US insurance carrier. So we bear the risk, we pay the claims, and we sell personal lines insurance. We sell our own home, auto, renters, condo, and umbrella insurance.
And you're
Uh,
co-founder and CTO. I forgot to mention that in your title.
yep. Yeah. Co-founder and CTO. And, I'm a big buy over build person in this
Mm.
serverless world. And so we still had to build a fair amount because in order to do what we do special, which is we help you buy like a home auto bundle in a minute. And with any other carrier, it'll take hours. And so in order to do that, it required building some new technology and doing some new software development. But we really relentlessly identified what is that was new and differentiated and what could we just buy off the shelf. And so that's how our infrastructure works.
And so you started, that was about 2018, I believe. Is that's kind of the
Yep,
time
that's right.
frame? And there was probably more build than buy back then. Do you find, has that changed? Has that swung around a little bit since then? 'Cause it's been like six
I
years.
don't actually, I wouldn't say that actually. We started building on AppSync actually when it was in private beta. So an Amazon service, GraphQL API as a service, but it existed it exists in this whole ecosystem where you get DynamoDB and Lambda and Cognito, so all these wonderful services. And then when we went out we need to do insurance rating and we need to create insurance forms, and we found a service called Clarion Door to do those. And so, certainly in the beginning, we had to build a bunch of things that now we just modify. And there are cases where we built stuff that we then threw away and we bought a service. And there are cases where we bought a service before and we
That didn't
threw that
work.
away and built it ourselves. And so we've done lots of different things. I would say that one of the best proofs that the architecture we have is really good and resilient is, one, most of our developers started their first development job with Brand. So we've hired mainly juniors
Yep.
and taught them how to build our way and turn them into full stack developers for us. But two is we've swapped out components in our full application. I mean, it's even hard to define what the application is. It's a mono repo. There's a bunch of front ends, some back end functions and configuration. But we've swapped a bunch of things out without much problem, in a very short amount of time, just swapping components out really easily. So it's been a very nice architecture to work with in that way too.
Joe, one
Oh,
thing, oops,
oh,
sorry.
go, Joe.
No, one thing that you touched on there, and I really wanted to ask you about when I was reading into your background and branch more holistically was, we talk a lot about diversity in tech and how we can help improve diversity in tech. But what I've never heard before is how do we make tech choices that help us to enable diversity? What are your thoughts on that? How has serverless helped you to achieve more diverse teams?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's possible, but not guaranteed in a serverless architecture is that you minimize the amount of technology you need to work with. So we use JavaScript and TypeScript on the front end and the back end, and we have shared packages between the two of them. We put it all in a mono repo, even including our mobile app, which is, hybrid, uses a framework. So all of that means it's just easier to work with. It's the same
Yeah,
language everywhere.
yeah.
And when you're using all these managed services, just really eliminate, what do people actually need to know to start working with anything?
Mm, mm,
We started in about 2019. I hired a number of developers where Branch was their first job.
mm.
We then started explicitly hiring people out of boot camps. We then started running our own boot camp. Then we could go explicitly we went into areas of Columbus, Ohio, where we're headquartered, and said, we'll pay you a relatively small stipend to help pay for food while you take this boot camp, as long as you're progressing in the boot camp. And then we offered internships and then jobs. And of course, there's a drop off in each, right? You get some people take the boot
Yes,
camp and don't
yes.
complete it. Some
Yeah.
people complete the boot camp, not good enough to do the internship. Some people complete the internship but aren't quite at the level we want to do the
What
job.
was your
Um,
success rate, Joe? Like, what do you think is the success rate of a program like that?
I think so if we took the 13 people who completed the boot camp, I think half of them were in states that we didn't want to hire from.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
so I think of the 7 that we offered internships to, I believe 3 are full-time developers right now.
That's
And I think
exceptional, though. That's an exceptional success rate, I feel. Like, I
it,
feel a lot of the time you go and, you help enterprises to create new operating models, and it comes with all of these, really high-end requirements for, like, people that manage middleware or databases that's, like, almost a blocker to moving to cloud, but it's almost like you've completely removed that blocker.
yeah, we've never had a hiring problem. It's never been an issue. And I think the most important thing is that this model that requires running your own boot camp means you have to hire well in advance of demand. So, I mean, you have to be starting the boot camp a year before you want
Yeah.
like a developer one. And I think probably the right ratio is something like for every 4 or 5 people that enter the boot camp, you should be expecting one
One,
out,
yeah.
out of the other side who started. And, we did fine. We ran this. And then the next couple hires we made were more senior developers because we were like, we
Yep.
need more mentors, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
uh, the other thing I'd say about hiring juniors is you have to be ready for it. You can't just
Yes.
hire junior developers into an existing organization. You have to teach them all sorts of things that they don't know. And one of the things that was great about building our own boot camp was being able to like make it not learn 85 different things in 3 months,
Yeah.
but learn React,
Yeah.
learn, and then learn Git. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Git is probably like hardest thing
it's
for a new
so
developer to
terrible. It's
work
hard
with.
for
Yeah.
me. It's hard for me, Jay. I always have to Google it.
And,
How many
you
years
know,
you know you about?
Too many.
like how pull requests, code reviews work, like how automated testing
Yeah.
works, how like linting works. Like those things are pretty easy to roll into a bootcamp curriculum. It's as far as we could tell, no bootcamp really did anything with any of them. And those were huge blockers to getting people started.
And were they like out of software engineering degrees, Joe, or were they like out of high school? Like what was the
Actually, most out of a first career. So a lot of like ex
Oh,
property
really?
managers, you had like an
Okay.
ex welder.
Interesting. That's cool. No, I love that. I think it's something that we really struggle with. And especially when organizations talk about cloud, there's just so many, when we look at the skill sets that we need, like, oh, we need people with 10, 15 years experience. And it's like, well, actually, by choosing different technology, can we potentially change that? And I know that obviously your organization is cloud native and not all organizations have the opportunity to be born on the cloud, but I think it's still a valid perspective.
It's so wonderful to know that we hire people and we can throw them into this general code base and kind of,
Yeah.
we don't give them very complicated tickets, but you get an issue and it could be anywhere in the application. People learn the cloud formation that is our
Mm.
infrastructure as code. Every developer has her own AWS account with a complete copy of production, which is something you can only do in serverless as well. So
Mm.
every environment is the same. There's so many opportunities of where things break down in a traditional virtual machine or
Mm.
container based architecture that you don't have to tolerate in a serverless setup. I feel like it's running an organization on easy mode when you're making all of these choices. And so certainly when I get in a lot of debates with people where they're like, oh, lock in or oh, cost, it's like, you're just wrong. Like but
Yeah.
Well, you're
why
evidence
are you,
that they're wrong. There's a lot to be said about minimizing the technologies and sharing the technologies, right? And
Mm.
people complain about JavaScript being complicated and, can't add numbers up and, all those weird, and sure, it's got its quirks, but let's be realistic. It's what's run on the front end and you
it's
cannot get
right. You're
away
going to
from it.
run it on the front end. You're going to run it on the front end. You should just run it on the back end. You can use TypeScript to address a lot of the problems you have. It's also like ES6 in particular is such a wonderful language for what the modern web development flow is. Like manipulating arrays is like such a large percentage of things we do. And the array manipulation and like object manipulation in JavaScript is just unbelievably great. I built lots of shareware in Turbo Pascal 6, built applications in Borland, Delphi, Borland C++ Builder. I've built in Enterprise J2EE. I built a startup called BuildFax in Python. I had another one in Ruby. I've done one in CoffeeScript. I've done .NET with C Sharp. So like, I mean, I have overseen a tremendous amount of different languages. I did a hardware device that ran micro Linux and just ANSI C on it. JavaScript is phenomenal. And, I feel like I've had enough experience with enough languages to feel highly confident that if what you're doing is largely writing modern web applications, you should be using JavaScript everywhere. It's a phenomenal choice.
And of course, that's when you're writing code, right? And you need to do everything you can to minimize the code. Talk about
Yes.
talk
Yeah.
about that a bit.
JavaScript is
Yeah,
the
talk about that a bit.
very readable. Yes. So there is, we at Branch have our rule, and I find most organizations don't have this, but what we optimize for when we develop software is we optimize for maintainability. So what we want is we want the average software developer, not the 10x ninja rock star. We want the average developer to be able to come and work with this code base and understand it, because that's what you're going to get. I mean,
Yeah.
like, don't optimize for, we need like the people who wrote it, aren't they geniuses? Only they can understand it. They must be geniuses. No, they're
Yeah.
terrible. They're
No,
terrible
this
at
is
organization. Get rid
this
of
is
them.
exactly right. Like I think most organizations have this, that they're like, we need however many full stack developers. And it's like, okay, how are you gonna find them for the amount of money that
Well,
you get paid them?
and I love when people are like, oh yeah, you need to be full stack. You got to write the microcode on the chip. You got to be able to lay out the silicone, right? Then you got to be able to do things. But realistically, like
Why?
what we say at Branch is we hire front end developers, we make them full stack developers by virtue of our architecture. And so
Mm,
really everyone at Branch, you're just a developer. At Branch, every developer, it's a monitoring, but every developer can work on every part of the code base and
wow.
does. And so every developer at Branch is full stack, but the way to solve the problem of full stack is not like hire the geniuses. It's make the stack really
Mm.
easy. Like it's a simple stack. It's all the same language. It's in one repository. You would run one command to deploy it. It's running like cloud formation, very simple infrastructure as code. It's just not hard to work with at
And
all.
one of the key things, right, is experimentation. And if every developer has their own account, then it's easy. If they don't know how a part of the app works, they
Can't
deploy it
break the
and they
bill.
look at it and they break it and they
Yep.
work out what went wrong.
Yep.
How many
Yeah,
organizations can do
exactly.
that?
It's what, and every developer's AWS account, costs us an average of like $3.50 a month because you're just paying for
It's
usage, right?
laughable.
Oh, what to use for your data?
Yeah.
Just on that point, because one of the most expensive parts of a stack is the database a lot of the time, right?
Yep.
So how do you get around that from a shared perspective, or you're using?
We use a couple.
Yes, I.
Our primary database is Dynamo, which is fabulous for us. I think there's some context where it's not the right choice, but if you can at all use DynamoDB in the pay per use. It's just phenomenal. I have nothing but wonderful things to say about using Dynamo. We do use Redis. We use a service called Upstash for Redis, which is a serverless, auto scalable, scale to zero service. It's the best Redis service that I've seen, although I know that there's like Memento and a couple other ones have come up since we started using Upstash. And then we use Neon's Postgres database. So far better than anything that Amazon calls serverless
Oh
in
yeah,
relation to a database is just not serverless.
yeah,
Neon is wonderful. It's again can essentially scale to zero, highly reliable, and so we use Neon for like lookup tables. It just works a lot better and we use Algolia as a search
yeah,
index as well. So we like to use a lot of different things for like fit for
yeah.
purpose.
So
Again, with our model, adding other services and like moving data between places is usually pretty easy and reliable,
yeah,
which is not always true in every stack. But, in this particular thing, like DynamoDB Streams in particular is just a phenomenal product that as far as I'm aware, really doesn't exist anywhere else with any other database product in as good as DynamoDB Streams are. And so you can write things to Dynamo and you can really reliably be able to pick off everything you've written and from the transaction log and just do other things with them. And it works very well.
yeah. So you've gone through a whole bunch of different fit for purpose, you know, products, SaaS products, effectively, and that's very different to what many organizations do, right? They usually shoehorn everything into the one piece of product
Yep.
that they've paid, you know, millions of dollars for, just because they need to extract as much value out of it as possible, even though it's probably making
Well,
everyone's life really difficult.
It's a sunk cost, man.
Exactly. So
I think another reason though that enterprises have difficulties here is that they have third-party risk management processes that are not designed to help people experiment and that are not designed to help their employees figure out fit for purpose services. And so a big part of what Branch has to do, I mean, we're a highly regulated company, is we have to be able to have a fast and effective third party risk management program where we can assess information security, we can assess the contracts and everything. And again, we use a lot of services to do this. Like there's a great service called Visa Trust that'll review information security to your guidelines, write you up great summaries, go collect all the information, go do follow-ups. So there's I think it is, if you want to do this type of experimentation, you have to build that muscle of how do I get comfortable with trying all these third party services
Mm.
and potentially working with startups who don't have all of the security audits in place yet. And then how do I feel about that? Like, how do I make sure that I'm classifying all my information so that I can make sure that, like, okay, well, I'm fine with this information going to a startup, but this information, absolutely not. We need to meet these standards. A lot of organizations make it so hard to do that evaluation that everybody just
Mm.
gives up. And so you can't use that. I mean, imagine any business, like, we're not going to come up with a way for you to use the newest, best technology. And the interesting thing about AI is that most organizations have realized, like, okay, let's make sure we can do
Yeah.
something with AI. So they're trying to find some way to do this. But I think in large part, one of the reasons why like a Microsoft will capture a lot of that market is not necessarily because they have the best products, but because they already have the contracts. And so the third party risk management looks different. It does take a lot of organization within a company to get yourself ready to try and use all these different services.
Obviously, with that sort of change, and like I know we touched a little bit on culture around like if looking at traditional organizations that are running all sorts of like middleware or containerization or whatever it is versus your organization operating, you know, predominantly or completely on serverless. Like, how do you think that reflects in the culture?
I think we very much on this culture of like maintainability, and one of our, like, the first corollary to optimizing for maintainability is that less code is more maintainable than more code. We also have an aphorism that is, it's better to spend 2 weeks researching and 2 days developing than 2 days
Yeah.
researching and 2 weeks developing
Yeah.
because of the amount of code you'll create. So we're very anti making code and very pro buying things. And I
Mm.
think that for not having containers and VMs, it helps set an expectation with people that we just don't care about those things. Let me give you another
Yeah. I mean, it's
cultural
no value
artifact.
add, really, right?
Yeah, we have another thing where we won't use cute names for things that we build. I was just part of a session where, an AI session where everyone was like giving their names for their AI chatbots. And on our side, our primary interface internally is called staff. And our primary customer facing interface is called quotes. And so they're designed to be thrown away, and they're designed to be rewritten in that way. We're not trying to save any of these things and celebrate.
We're not attached to them emotionally.
Right. Yep.
I love
So there's a
that.
lot,
That's great.
there's a lot I think about that is like, how do I make it so, because I want a developer to say my value is in what I can do for our going forward goals, not what I
Mm.
have built that I'm trying to protect.
Yeah, totally. It's like that. And I always think of it like a lot of people are even from a like career perspective, are kind of like hanging on to their roles. Like if I lose, like if I lose my job, where my perspective has always been like, if I can work myself out of a job, that's the best outcome, right, for
And
me and
and
for
it,
my
it
organization.
right. And it's why you should never want to have a job or have someone with a title of like Oracle database administrator. It's like the worst job title ever because you're never going to leave Oracle.
Yeah. Getting
Like
a new
you're
job.
tied yourself to like a company. Like what an albatross.
Yeah, getting a changing jobs is hard because you have to change your title to be able to change your job before anyone will take you
Yep.
seriously,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. I was back on the vendor thing, so I was reading your book, um, Serverless.
Yes.
Serverless is a game changer.
Everyone should buy it.
Just a little plug there for you. Around the way you do vendor management and software vendor management, right? It's a little bit different to the regular way of things because the line of business managers have more control over the SaaS products, right? And they're closer to the business. Do you want to talk about a bit more how that's different?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that with how effective software as a service is today, there's no reason why a company shouldn't view it as any other kind of vendor relationship you would have. So we have insurance claims, we have a claims department, and that claims department, say, has a relationship with a bunch of auto repair shops. We don't have some kind of centralized part of the company, which is like, if you want to make a relationship with any company, you have to like we'll run it centrally. We don't do that. And so the claims department has the dealer repair network we have.
Mm.
I don't understand why would we not want them to have that same relationship with the primary software as a service they use to manage their claims? I mean, it's run by this vendor, it's in the cloud for them. Like, we'll do integrations with it, but like centralized selection and centralized ownership of that relationship, I just see largely as a
Mm.
bad control issue or a bad blocker. And so now again, you have to have a good third party risk management process. And so occasionally someone will come with a vendor and say, we want to do business with this company. And we'll take a look at them and we'll say, absolutely not. Like, the information you would need to get to them is very sensitive, and they have terrible controls and no real sense that their controls will be any better in the future. And they don't seem to care about it. And so we'll say, no, you can't do it. So it's not that you wouldn't have some amount of centralized control. It's just that the main vendor relationships, I think you want owned by the department heads, and you want them to make those choices because you want ownership. You want accountability. I can't hold you accountable for something if I'm not letting you make the key decisions?
Yeah. And that's, yeah, there's probably a layer of people there that you don't need in that case, right? You've got your risk side, and then you've got to deal with all those issues. And then you've got the managers and the business side who
Yeah,
can make those decisions.
we effectively don't have internal IT staff. Even though we have hundreds of employees, we outsource help desk. We have our chief information security officer, who is wonderful, is also the head of IT. By the way, I love doing that because it means you don't have someone putting in
Yeah.
security roles that
It's like
prevent
dual
productivity,
accountability.
Yeah,
It's
but
hard.
that's
Hey.
really good.
he's accountable for productivity, which is great, right? So he has to worry about productivity and security. He's wonderful. He likes doing it. And then, in general, we use a local firm in Columbus to handle help desk, and that's great. We also like our employees to be empowered to fix things in general.
Mm.
But if you looked at our SOC 2 audits and how we do things, like, the security is amazing. It's fully zero trust. There's no internal network. In our office, working in our office is like working at a hotel. Like, it's all identity as a perimeter, single sign on, great multi-factor auth, like great remote control of endpoint devices, really good endpoint security. But all of that comes down to, instead of us spending the money on a lot of internal IT people who want to buy hardware and touch and feel it and point to the, $800,000 SAM that they have, we've spent that money on, how do we have this great security? And how do we make sure that the people who care about all this are accountable for getting things done as well?
And yeah, that's really different. A lot of organizations want to get there, but they find it too hard because probably their organization's getting in the way a little bit, right? So you say you don't really have an IT department, and therefore you probably don't have operations people, right? From a operations perspective,
That's
how do
right.
your devs handle being able to flip between the two modes? Is there a difference for a start?
I mean, in serverless, you're writing infrastructure as code. The CI CD does the deployment, right? Or you can run the simple command that does the deployment. You've got your test suites. And so in general, when you deploy anything, it being up or down is not something under your control, unless there's a bug in the code or like a bug in your infrastructure. We structure things so that the more senior you are, the more kind of on call you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
So I and my VP of engineering, Ivan Herndon, and then our more senior developers are the ones who will respond to alerts. Realistically, again, we generally speaking, if there is an alert that has a problem, it's an edge case bug in code, Occasionally a vendor will have a problem. And so something will go down. The last significant outage we had that was more than a couple minutes was January of 2022, which was our primary like rating engine vendor. And we just had to wait for them to come back up. But beyond that, it stays up and our vendors deal with it. And honestly, we use Slack, and Slack goes down a lot more than any of our
Okay.
infrastructure has, which is
Yeah, that's
so,
a thing.
um, you know,
That's a great thing about third party services. They'll definitely, because they have so many customers, they're geared to get things back usually
Got to
quickly.
keep it up.
Exactly. Um,
yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
get worried when we're not in a multi-tenant environment. I always want to be multi-tenant. It's also why we're in US East 1,
yeah.
you know?
what I wanted to ask was, I know that obviously, Joe, I know your organization was born on cloud. So a lot of our listeners probably are not in that same context. Like they were, potentially born on prem 40 years ago or whatever, right? But I still think that there are, I mean, I think we've already touched on like a lot of different, like cultural mechanisms and ideas. But what do you think are the biggest for like executives? What do you think are the biggest learnings from an organization like yours? Like what are the things that you find sharing most productive?
Yeah, I think that the biggest obstacle to making changes in an organization is the organizational culture. And so I think if you're unhappy with how things are, that your first step is to change the culture to align the people in the organization with what you're trying to achieve that's not being achieved. And really the
Mm.
first thing you want to do is to get everyone to agree that there's a problem, right? I mean, you're always going to run into these issues if as an executive you think this software development process is terrible and it takes forever,
Yeah.
and like and it's very expensive, but everyone involved in it thinks it has to be that way and it's actually very
Mm.
reasonable and there's no way to do it better. Like you need to solve that problem first,
Mm.
like get everyone on the same page. You can't actually do anything. I mean, you could order people to do things differently, but like
It's not a
realistically,
driver
it
for
won't. Yeah.
change.
Yeah. And so I think so much of this drives from culture. I think there are a lot of people who take pride in what they built and how they know how to do things. And
Yeah.
it's essentially they'll have to change jobs in order to do anything differently. They're just stuck. And there are some people who are amazing at changing culture, like a lot better
Mm.
than I am, might be able to, help people understand, like, I'm going to need you to do something different and learn to do something in a different way. But in my experience, I'm certainly not great at it.
I think
So
often it's and just from my experience, it's about giving people like the boundaries for change. Like this is where we're going. We would love to have you, but also if that's not aligned with where you're going, then that's okay too. You know what I
yep,
mean? Like I think a lot of leaders actually don't want to have that even baseline conversation to say, this is where we're going.
yep,
Do you want to jump
right.
on board? Because
I
that's too
totally agree.
stressful for them, right?
Right. I mean, you have to, if you're a leader, that's your responsibility to do that. And
It is. It is. I
I
would say
think the other,
90% of leaders struggle with that though.
I, I believe it. Yeah. I think that a couple of the biggest mistakes that I see, that are kind of own goals in this are one, there's always this desire that I see to like say like, okay, we've got the old bad stuff and there's going to be the new hotness. And then they like, these people work on new hotness. You people work on old badness. And like, like you're
Yes.
just ruining the
Yes.
culture of companies. You can't do that. Also, there's this
Yeah.
desire that's like everything that we have right now is bad and we want to like shut it. Like everything that's on prem, we need to go to the cloud and we're going to celebrate when we turn the last server off. Like that's a stupid thing to
Yeah.
optimize for. You can run things on prem forever. I mean, that's fine. Like what you need to do is you can't have these different things you're optimizing for. You don't optimize for one primary thing. Usually in this context, it's I want to optimize for being able to develop good software faster. right? I want to solve more customers' problems in less time, right?
Mm.
With high quality software. And so if that's the goal, then you should have that metric and you should optimize for that metric and choose the things that will help you optimize for that. You also should figure out how to deliver quick. I mean, ideally, every week something new is out there. And so,
Mm.
any project that's like, I mean, the number of times I've been involved in conversations where like, okay, we've got this 6 months, in 6 months, it'll be over and we'll turn off the old and the new one will be on. And then every one of those, like 18 months after that, developers are like, just another 3 years. Like that's every one of those projects.
This
You
doesn't
can't
sound
do that.
familiar at all.
You you have, you have to design for, we'll do this in a week. And then if it takes 3 weeks, it's okay, but you need to have that. You need to, there are all sorts of great ways to do this. A lot of this is written in my book too, about like these strategies. And then that's right. And then the last piece of advice I would give is the best book written about effective software development is Accelerate. Nicole Forsgren, Jez Humble, et cetera. Those metrics and those Dora metrics are like what everybody should be using as a default. It should be like, that's the default. And if you want to do something different, you started there and you decided why they weren't working. So if the goal is effective software development, you have to start with Dora metrics. And then you have to ask, what are the tactics I could be deploying to speed up the Dora metrics, at least in the software development projects I have? And so I don't, I always feel a lot better in a situation which says, okay, we've got this old stuff over here and this old stuff over there, this old stuff over there. They're maintenance, but we're not touching them. We're not gonna spend any more time on them. They're fine. This thing that really matters to the business, we put over here. It's different in this way. And we've given people the chance to opt into it. We've also set the expectation with everyone that we're experimenting. We're going to make mistakes,
Mm.
but we're going to
Yeah.
judge ourselves by the Dora metrics,
Yeah.
And I think that culturally works so much better, and you're not optimizing for multiple things, and it lets you really hit the thing you're trying to achieve for the org.
I think you're right, Joe. And I think a lot of people get almost like when people come to me and are like, oh, that didn't work out. And I'm like, okay, but what does it matter? Like in the end, it's just a learning, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're all only learning. If
Unless,
things don't work out, it's probably an
unless it took
achievement,
you
really.
like $10 million in 18 months, then
Yes.
it might not be
Yes.
okay. But yeah, if it took you like a couple weeks and it didn't work out, then
It's
great.
fine.
You're moving
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Joe. Lots of great insights there. Thanks for coming on. We
Yeah.
really
No,
appreciate
thank you
your
so much for
time.
joining us. Yeah.
No, thanks for having me. It's great.
And
We will obviously post all the details for Joe's book,
yes, it's part of the
so you
show
can go and
notes.
buy it. Yes, I'll put it in the LinkedIn post and in the show notes. But no, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate it. This is our second in our, we're doing a serverless month. Serverless month is
Excellent.
February. Actually, we might bridge into March.
Slightly.
Oh, we're doing serverless and then serverless up
Okay,
models.
you can
and
have many
this-
months of serverless. I think it's all good.
Yes.
Rename the podcast.
Oh, no. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
And
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.
And if anyone's got any feedback, just email us at the usual email, feedback@cloud-dialogues.com. Please spam it. Do not email us. We get plenty of spam.
No abuse, please.
That's right. All right. Thanks. See you later. Till next time. See you, Georgia. See you, Joe.